My name is Rosanna. I'm 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. My husband Jake and I lived in a beautiful suburban home next to what seemed like the ideal neighbours. That all changed the day I came home early from my nursing shift and heard strange noises coming from our basement storage room. What I discovered not only ended my marriage, but taught me what true strength looks like. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. Jake and I had been married for 7 wonderful years. Well, at least I thought they were wonderful. We met at my college friend's birthday party when I was 25 and he was 27. I still remember how he approached me with his charming smile and confident manner, asking if I wanted to escape the noise for a quieter conversation on the patio. We talked until sunrise about everything from our childhood dreams to our favourite books. Jake worked as a sales manager for a national retail chain, and I was completing my nursing degree, preparing to work in the emergency room. Our romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were engaged and we married in a beautiful ceremony at a local vineyard the following spring. All our friends said we were the perfect match, the hard-working, compassionate nurse and the charismatic, successful businessman. We complemented each other in ways I never thought possible. After 2 years of marriage, we bought our dream home, a lovely 2-story colonial in Oakwood Estates, an upscale suburb known for its excellent schools and tight-knit community. The house had everything we wanted: 4 bedrooms for our future children, a spacious kitchen for entertaining, and a basement with a large storage room where we kept holiday decorations, old photo albums, and Jake's extensive collection of sports memorabilia. My job as an ER nurse was demanding but fulfilling. I typically worked 3 12-hour shifts per week, sometimes overnight, which meant Jake and I occasionally went a day without seeing each other awake. But we made our opposite schedules work. When I came home exhausted after helping save lives, Jake would have dinner waiting or at least a glass of wine and a listening ear as I decompressed from the day. We built a comfortable, upper-middle-class life together. Jake earned a generous salary plus commissions, and my nursing income provided stability. We took annual vacations to tropical destinations, joined the local country club for weekend golf, and had started discussing having our first child. From the outside, our life looked picture perfect. 6 months before everything fell apart, the house next door sold to Mark and Stephanie Anderson. They seemed like the ideal neighbours, both in their early 30s, like us, professional and sociable. Mark worked as a financial advisor and travelled frequently for business. Stephanie ran her own small interior design business from home, which gave her a flexible schedule. We welcomed them to the neighbourhood with a small dinner party, inviting a few other couples from the block. Stephanie immediately stood out, always perfectly dressed in the latest fashions, with flawless makeup and a bubbly personality that drew people in. Mark was more reserved but friendly, clearly proud of his outgoing wife. As the weeks passed, we began spending more time with the Andersons. Weekend barbecues, occasional dinners, and even a couple's trip to a nearby winery. Jake and Mark bonded over sports, while Stephanie and I developed what I thought was a budding friendship. She asked lots of questions about my work as a nurse, seeming genuinely interested in the medical stories I shared. Looking back, I should have noticed how Stephanie's attention would always drift to Jake when he entered the room, how her laugh became just a little louder, her touch lingering a bit too long on his arm when they conversed. But I trusted my husband completely. When Stephanie complimented Jake's athletic build or business success in front of everyone, I felt proud rather than concerned. Around the 4-month mark after the Andersons moved in, I began noticing subtle changes in Jake. He worked later than usual. Our physical intimacy decreased, with Jake often claiming exhaustion from long days at the office. He seemed distracted during our conversations, checking his phone more frequently than before. But each time I questioned these changes, Jake had a reasonable explanation. A new project at work, stress about hitting his quarterly sales targets, or simply fatigue. I believed him because that's what you do when you love someone. You choose to believe them even when small doubts begin to creep into the corners of your mind. The first real sign something wasn't right came when Jake started receiving text messages late at night. I'm not the type to snoop through my husband's phone, but when it repeatedly dinged at midnight while he was in the shower, curiosity got the better of me. The messages were from work team, but something about the timing felt off. When I casually mentioned it, Jake became defensive, saying his sales team was working on a major proposal with an international client in a different time zone. Then Jake began wearing a new cologne, something I hadn't purchased for him. When I commented on the unfamiliar scent, he claimed it was a sample from a department store given to him while buying my upcoming anniversary gift. The explanation seemed plausible, yet something in his eyes didn't match his words. Around the same time, Stephanie started showing unusual interest in my work schedule. At first, her questions seemed innocent, wondering when I'd be free for coffee or shopping. But soon she was asking specific details: which days I worked overnight shifts, how long my commute took, whether I ever came home early, if the ER wasn't busy. "I'm trying to plan a neighborhood ladies' brunch," she explained, when I finally asked why she needed to know my schedule in such detail. "And since you're working such crazy hours, I want to make sure we pick a time that works for you." Again, a reasonable explanation. Yet an uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. Jake's disappearances during my shifts became more frequent. He'd claim he was working late, meeting clients for dinner or hanging out with friends from his gym. When I called his office once during one of these supposed late work nights, his assistant said he'd left hours earlier. Jake later insisted he'd been at a business dinner that had run long, and I convinced myself to believe him. At neighborhood gatherings, I began noticing Jake and Stephanie finding moments to talk privately, nothing overtly suspicious. A conversation by the drinks table at a block party, a discussion about a book they'd both read, while the rest of us were playing cards. Yet their body language seemed intimate, with Stephanie standing just a little too close, laughing a little too enthusiastically at Jake's jokes. One evening, I found a faint lipstick smudge on the collar of Jake's white dress shirt while doing laundry. The shade was a distinctive coral, not a colour I ever wore. When confronted, Jake seemed momentarily flustered, before explaining that his female colleague had hugged him. Congratulations after they landed a major account. The stain matched the bright coral lipstick I'd seen Stephanie wearing at our last neighborhood gathering, but I dismissed the connection as paranoid thinking. My best friend from the hospital, Tara, came over for wine one Friday evening while Jake was supposedly at a work event. After several glasses, she gathered the courage to voice what apparently others had noticed. "I don't want to overstep," Tara said carefully, "but have you noticed how that neighbour of yours looks at Jake, like she's undressing him with her eyes?" I defended both Jake and Stephanie vigorously. "She's just very outgoing and friendly with everyone, and Jake would never cheat on me. We're trying to start a family soon." Tara dropped the subject, but her concerned expression stayed with me. Small things around our house began to feel off. I'd come home from a long shift and notice picture frames, slightly moved couch cushions, not exactly as I'd left them. Once I found a wine glass in the dishwasher that I didn't remember using, a different style than our usual glasses, with a faint coral lipstick mark that hadn't completely washed away. Jake became increasingly protective of his phone, changing his password and taking it with him even for quick trips to the bathroom. When I asked about it casually, he claimed he'd had a security concern after a colleague's phone was hacked. The most unsettling incident occurred during a dinner at our house with the Andersons. Stephanie mentioned a childhood story about Jake, how he'd broken his arm falling from a treehouse at his grandparents' farm in Wisconsin when he was 8. It was a story I'd never heard, despite being married to Jake for 7 years. When I expressed surprise, Jake quickly explained he must have told Stephanie during one of their neighborhood conversations. The explanation made sense, yet something about the familiar way Stephanie recounted the story, with personal details about Jake's grandparents' farm that even I didn't know, left me feeling hollow. That night, after the Andersons left, I asked Jake directly if there was something I should know about him and Stephanie. "You're being ridiculous," he scoffed, seeming genuinely offended. "She's our neighbor and Mark's wife. We're just friends. You're working too hard and getting paranoid." He pulled me into a hug, kissing the top of my head the way he always did when comforting me. I wanted desperately to believe him. After all, what kind of person would have an affair with the neighbor? The risk, the proximity, the inevitable discovery. Surely no one would be that foolish or disrespectful. So I pushed down my suspicions, buried them under the weight of 7 years of trust and love. I told myself I was being insecure, that my irregular work schedule was making me imagine problems where none existed. I committed to working on our marriage, planning special date nights, initiating intimacy more often, trying to be more present when we were together. All the while, the evidence continued mounting, and the knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing day. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at the hospital for my 12-hour shift, prepared for the usual emergency room chaos. But surprisingly, patient volume was unusually low that evening. By 8 o'clock, my supervisor suggested some of us could leave early since they were overstaffed. After working 6 hours of my scheduled 12-hour shift, I gratefully accepted the opportunity to go home and get some unexpected rest. I didn't text Jake to tell him I was coming home early. I thought I might surprise him with takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant and maybe watch a movie together. Quality time we'd been missing lately. The spring evening was beautiful, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers as I pulled into our driveway around 8:30. Jake's car was parked in its usual spot, which meant he was home. I noticed another car parked across the street that looked like Stephanie's white BMW, but I didn't think much of it. Perhaps she was visiting another neighbor. Our street was always social, with people dropping by each other's homes frequently. I entered through the front door, quietly calling out Jake's name. No answer. The main floor was empty, though lights were on in the kitchen and living room. Jake's briefcase sat by the couch, his phone nowhere in sight. Unusual, since he rarely went anywhere without it these days. "Jake!" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. I set the Thai food on the kitchen counter and noticed 2 wine glasses in the sink, one with that same coral lipstick stain I'd seen before. My heart began to pound as I stood frozen, staring at those glasses. That's when I heard it. A thump from the basement, followed by muffled laughter. A woman's laugh, followed by my husband's distinct low chuckle. My legs moved automatically toward the basement door. Each step down the wooden staircase felt like walking through molasses. My hands trembled so badly, I had to grip the railing to steady myself. The main basement area was empty, but the door to our storage room was closed. Another laugh, definitely female, came from behind that door. I approached slowly, feeling as though I was moving outside my body, watching myself from above. My heart pounded so loudly, I was certain they must hear it through the door. I reached for the handle, hesitated for just a moment, then turned it and pushed the door open. The storage room was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room, between stacks of plastic bins containing our Christmas decorations and camping gear, stood my husband and Stephanie Anderson. Jake's shirt was unbuttoned, Stephanie's hands on his chest. Her blouse hung open, revealing a lacy, coral-coloured bra that matched her lipstick. They were kissing deeply, so engrossed in each other they didn't notice me immediately. Time seemed to stop. My vision narrowed to a tunnel focused only on them. The blood rushed in my ears so loudly it sounded like ocean waves. I must have made a sound, a gasp or cry, because Jake suddenly looked up, his eyes widening in shock as he saw me standing in the doorway. "Rosanna!" he exclaimed, immediately pushing away from Stephanie. "This isn't—" "I can explain," but there was nothing to explain. The scene before me told the entire story with perfect clarity. 7 years of marriage shattered in an instant. Stephanie didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, she had the audacity to give me a small smirk as she slowly buttoned her blouse. "Rosanna, I thought you were working until morning," she said calmly, as if I'd merely interrupted a coffee date. The casual way she said it confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't their first time together. They had been monitoring my schedule, waiting for my shifts to create their opportunities. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Jake approached me, his face contorted in what appeared to be remorse, but I knew better now. "Baby, please, this was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." His words hit me like physical blows. Didn't mean anything? Was that supposed to make me feel better, that he'd thrown away our marriage for something meaningless? I felt my knees weaken as the full reality crashed over me. The suspicious texts, the new cologne, the moved objects around the house, Stephanie's interest in my schedule, all the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My stomach lurched, and for a moment I thought I might actually be ill. But then something unexpected happened. As I stood there watching my husband and my neighbour struggle to compose themselves, a surge of pure rage replaced my shock. A cold, clear anger crystallized in my chest. Without thinking through the consequences, I took one step backward and slammed the storage room door shut. Our storage room had an old-fashioned lock, the kind that required a key from either side. I always kept the key on a hook just outside the door, in case someone accidentally gets locked in, as Jake used to joke. My hand found the key, automatically turned it in the lock, and removed it. "Rosanna!" Jake's muffled voice came through the door, followed by the sound of his fist pounding against it. "What are you doing? Open the door." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked upstairs in a trance-like state, Jake's keys in my hand, my mind racing but oddly clear. I found my phone on the kitchen counter, scrolled to my contacts, and found Mark Anderson's number, exchanged months ago during neighbourhood planning. With trembling fingers but resolute determination, I pressed call. Mark answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful. "Rosanna, hey, what's up?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. How do you tell someone their spouse is having an affair with your husband? What words could possibly soften such a blow? "Rosanna, are you there?" Mark sounded concerned now. "Mark," I finally managed my voice, barely above a whisper. "I need you to come to my house right now. It's important." "Is everything okay? Is Stephanie all right?" The immediate concern he showed for his wife twisted the knife deeper. "Stephanie is here," I said carefully. "She's with Jake. I found them together in our storage room." I paused, then added with cold clarity, "They're having an affair." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, his voice returned low and dangerous. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." While waiting for Mark, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. From the basement, I could hear Jake alternating between pleading and threatening. "Rosanna, please let us out. This is crazy. We need to talk about this. Then, if you don't open this door right now, I swear to God, Rosanna." Stephanie's voice occasionally joined in, but I couldn't make out her words. I felt nothing. No tears, no screaming, just a strange, detached calm. The person I had trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and with our neighbour of all people. True to his word, Mark arrived within minutes, his car screeching into our driveway. I met him at the front door. His face was flushed eyes, wild with anger and hurt. Without a word, I led him through the house to the basement door. "They're in the storage room," I said flatly. "I locked them in." A flash of grim appreciation crossed Mark's features. "Good thinking." Together, we descended the basement stairs. The pounding and shouting from the storage room had stopped, replaced by urgent whispers I couldn't quite make out. Mark and I exchanged a look, and I handed him the key. "Your call," I said. Mark took a deep breath, inserted the key, and turned it. The door swung open to reveal Jake and Stephanie, now fully dressed, but looking disheveled and trapped. Jake's face transformed from relief at the opening door to horror at seeing Mark standing beside me. "Mark!" Stephanie stammered, her usual confidence evaporating. "This isn't what it looks like." Mark laughed bitterly. "Really, because it looks exactly like what Rosanna said. You're screwing her husband in their basement." The four of us stood in a terrible tableau, two betrayed spouses facing their cheating partners. Jake tried to approach me, but I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Rosanna, please," Jake begged. "We need to talk alone. I can explain everything." "Explain what?" I finally found my voice, surprisingly steady. "How long you've been sleeping with our neighbour. How you waited for my overnight shifts to invite her into our home, our bed." Jake flinched at the accuracy of my accusations. "It wasn't like that. I've been under so much stress at work and you're gone so often. So, this is my fault." The absurdity of his excuse almost made me laugh. "I'm working saving lives and that gives you permission to cheat." Stephanie suddenly shifted strategies, her shock transforming into defensive anger. "Don't act so surprised, Rosanna. Maybe if you paid more attention to your husband, instead of working all the time, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." Mark grabbed Stephanie's arm. "Stop talking, now!" His voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "How long has this been going on?" When neither Jake nor Stephanie answered immediately, I pressed, "How long?" Stephanie lifted her chin defiantly. 4 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 4 months. Nearly as long as they'd been our neighbours. While I was befriending this woman, inviting her into my home, sharing meals together, she'd been sleeping with my husband. "Where?" Mark demanded. "Just here or—" "Everywhere," Stephanie replied with a strange pride that made my stomach turn. "Here, our house, when you were travelling hotels when we could manage it." Jake wouldn't meet my eyes as Stephanie revealed the extent of their betrayal. How they used my work schedule to plan their meetings, how they laughed about the close calls when I nearly caught them, how they'd been considering taking a weekend trip together, creating elaborate lies to tell Mark and me. I'd heard enough. "Get out," I said quietly, then louder. "All of you get out of my house. Now." "Rosanna, please." Jake tried one last time. 7 years of marriage. "You can't just throw that away. We can work through this." "You threw it away," I corrected him, my voice ice cold. "The moment you decided our neighbour was more important than our vows. Get your things and get out tonight. I'll have the rest of your stuff packed tomorrow." Mark looked at me with something like respect before turning to Stephanie. "Let's go. We have our own discussion waiting at home." As they climbed the stairs, Jake made one last attempt grabbing my hand. This meant nothing. It was just physical. "I love you, not her." I pulled away as if burned. "That makes it worse, not better. Leave your house key. You don't live here anymore." I followed them upstairs, watching as Jake grabbed an overnight bag from our closet stuffing clothes inside with shaking hands. Stephanie and Mark had already left the sound of their heated argument carrying across the driveway. When the front door finally closed behind Jake, I locked it, slid down against it, and only then allowed the tears to come. That first night alone was the longest of my life. I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed, knowing they had likely been there together. Instead, I curled up on the living room couch, crying until there were no tears left, then staring emptily at the ceiling until dawn broke. The days following the discovery were a blur of pain and practical matters. Jake called and texted relentlessly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to tearfully desperate. "Please, Rosanna, we need to talk. I made a terrible mistake. Don't throw away 7 years over one mistake. You're not being fair by refusing to discuss this." I blocked his number after the 20th call, needing space to think clearly without his manipulations. But Jake wasn't deterred. He started showing up at the hospital during my shifts, bringing flowers and waiting in the parking lot. My co-workers ran interference keeping him away, while I slipped out back entrances. His family got involved next. His mother called crying, saying everyone makes mistakes, and true love means forgiveness. His sister texted that I was being cruel by not even giving him a chance to explain. Friends we shared took sides, most supporting me, but some suggesting I was overreacting, that affairs happen in many marriages that ultimately survive. 3 days after discovering the affair, I hired a locksmith to change all the locks on the house. I packed Jake's essential belongings into boxes and arranged for his brother to pick them up. I couldn't bear to see him, to hear his excuses, to risk being manipulated by the man I had once trusted completely. I called my parents, who lived 2 states away. My mum offered to fly in immediately, but I declined. "I need to learn to stand on my own," I explained through tears. Instead, we talked for hours on video calls as I processed my new reality. My closest friend, Tara, became my lifeline. She brought over meals when I couldn't eat, sat with me through sleepless nights, and reminded me that the betrayal reflected Jake's character flaws, not my worth. "You're going to get through this," she insisted, holding my hands as I sobbed one evening, "and you'll come out stronger on the other side." I wanted to believe her, but in those early days, strength felt impossible. My body physically ached with grief. I lost 8 pounds in the first week. My hands shook constantly. At work, I functioned on autopilot, my training taking over while my heart remained shattered. Meanwhile, neighbourhood gossip spread quickly. I learned through Tara, who heard from another neighbour, that Stephanie had a reputation I hadn't known about. Apparently, this wasn't her first affair. Before moving to our neighbourhood, she'd been involved with a colleague at her previous workplace, which had precipitated the Andersons' move. The most devastating discovery came when I finally gathered the courage to enter our bedroom and really look around. In the nightstand on Jake's side, I found hotel receipts and a small container of coral-coloured lipstick, the same shade I'd noticed on his collar. Under the bed was an earring I recognised as Stephanie's, confirming they had been intimate in our marital bed. Searching his desk drawer, I found a burner phone Jake had hidden. The text messages between him and Stephanie went back nearly 5 months, starting just 3 weeks after the Andersons moved in. The messages were explicit and emotional, filled with planning for their meetups and complaints about their spouses. Jake had told Stephanie I was cold, career-obsessed, never home. He claimed to feel trapped and unfulfilled in our marriage. Reading those messages was like having my heart torn out all over again. The Jake in these texts was unrecognisable, cruel about me, obsessed with Stephanie plotting deceptions. In one particularly painful exchange, they joked about using my overnight shifts as their play dates. Another discussed a weekend trip they were planning to take, with elaborate lies already constructed to tell Mark and me. When Jake finally cornered me outside the grocery store a week after discovery, I was armed with this new knowledge. His eyes were bloodshot, his normally pristine appearance dishevelled. "Rosanna, please," he began, his voice breaking. "I miss you. I made a terrible mistake. She meant nothing to me. It was just physical attraction that got out of hand." I stared at the stranger before me. "Nothing about that is true. I found your secret phone, Jake. I read your messages. You told her you loved her. You complained about me. You planned a future together." His face drained of colour. "You went through my things. That's invasion of privacy." The absurdity of his outrage almost made me laugh. "Privacy? You gave up any right to privacy when you brought another woman into our bed." "I felt neglected," he countered, his tone shifting to accusatory. "You're never home. When you are home, you're exhausted or talking about work. A man has needs, Rosanna." In that moment, hearing him blame me for his choices, something shifted inside me. The lingering love I'd felt despite the betrayal began to curdle into contempt. "No, Jake. A man has choices. You chose to break your vows instead of talking to me about your concerns. You chose to lie for months. You chose Stephanie." "It was a mistake," he shouted, drawing attention from other shoppers. "People make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in anger," I replied calmly. "Having a 4-month affair with our neighbour in our home, in our bed, is a series of deliberate choices. I've made my choice too. I've consulted a divorce attorney. You'll be hearing from them soon. As I walked away, Jake called after me, his voice cracking. You'll regret this. No one will ever love you like I do. I didn't look back. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a tiny spark of something besides pain, the faintest glimmer of self-respect and resolve. That evening I sat in our shower, my shower now, letting hot water pour over me as I sobbed uncontrollably. The pain felt bottomless, my future unimaginable. For one dark moment, I considered calling Jake, telling him I'd changed my mind, that we could try to work things out, anything to stop this unbearable agony. But I didn't make that call. Instead, I dried my tears, wrapped myself in a towel, and stared at my reflection in the steamy mirror. You deserve better, I told the broken woman, looking back at me, and you're strong enough to find it. 3 weeks after Discovery Day, as I was beginning to establish a new normal, an unexpected visitor knocked on my door. Mark Anderson stood on my porch, looking as haggard as I felt. Can we talk? He asked simply. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat in my living room, two broken people united by shared betrayal. I found something you should see, Mark said, placing a folder on the coffee table between us. After that day, I did some investigating of my own. This isn't Stephanie's first affair. Inside the folder were printouts of emails, bank statements, and hotel receipts dating back 2 years. Evidence of Stephanie's previous affairs, including one with her boss that led to them moving to our neighborhood. There were also recent text messages between Stephanie and Jake that Mark had recovered, revealing that their relationship had begun just weeks after moving in next door. I thought you deserved to know the full truth, Mark said quietly. Jake wasn't some innocent led astray. From these messages, it looks like he pursued Stephanie quite aggressively from the beginning. The evidence was painful but clarifying. Jake had initiated the affair, complimenting Stephanie excessively at that first neighborhood dinner, texting her the next day, suggesting they meet for lunch while I was working. The pursuit had been deliberate and immediate. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for this difficult truth. As painful as this is, it helps me stop blaming myself. Mark nodded in understanding. I've spent weeks wondering what I did wrong, how I failed as a husband, but at some point, we have to accept that their choices weren't about us. They were about their own selfishness. Over cups of coffee that turned cold as we talked, Mark and I formed an unexpected alliance. We shared the humiliation, rage, and grief that only those who have been betrayed can truly understand. By the time he left hours later, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not happiness, not even acceptance yet, but a comforting recognition that I wasn't alone in this pain. The next day, I consulted with a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. I was shocked to learn that Jake had been hiding money, diverting part of his commissions to a separate account I knew nothing about. The attorney also discovered Jake had recently applied for a passport, despite already having one, suggesting he might have been planning to create a new identity or financial holdings I couldn't trace. With this new information, I confronted Jake when he came by the house unannounced, still pleading for reconciliation. I know about the hidden money, I said without preamble, and the passport application. Jake's face revealed the truth before he could deny it. He shifted strategies instantly. You've turned into someone I don't recognize, he snapped, anger replacing his previously contrite demeanor. Snooping, hiring lawyers, refusing to even discuss our marriage. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to pursue our neighbor, I replied calmly. I've filed for divorce. Given the evidence of your infidelity and financial deception, my attorney believes this will be straightforward. Jake's facade finally cracked completely. You'll regret this, he snarled, his handsome face contorted with rage. I was willing to forgive your neglect, your obsession with work, your frigidity. No one will want you after me, Rosanna. You'll die alone with your nursing scrubs and your self-righteousness. As his true character revealed itself in ugly, venomous words, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This man, this angry, deceptive stranger, was not the person I had believed him to be for 7 years. Perhaps he never had been. Goodbye, Jake, I said, closing the door on his tirade and symbolically on our marriage. The divorce filing seemed to make the reality irrefutable. After that confrontation, Jake's attempts to contact me decreased, then stopped entirely. Through mutual friends, I learned he and Stephanie had begun dating, openly flaunting their relationship around town. Rather than hurting me further, this news cemented my conviction that leaving was the only option. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts to stay busy and rebuild my savings. I started weekly therapy sessions where I began unpacking not just the betrayal, but the subtle ways Jake had undermined my confidence over the years. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, rebuilt my support system, and slowly, day by day, rediscovered myself. The house that had once been our dream home needed transformation to become mine alone. I redecorated the bedroom first, replacing the bed, painting the walls a soothing blue, creating a sanctuary that held no memories of betrayal. I rearranged furniture, donated Jake's abandoned possessions, and planted a small garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted, but Jake had discouraged. Most symbolically, I renovated the basement storage room where I'd discovered them. I cleared out the storage boxes, installed proper lighting, and transformed the space into a combination home office and reading nook. What had been the site of my greatest pain became a place of creativity and peace. Meanwhile, the neighborhood's social dynamics shifted dramatically. Jake and Stephanie found themselves increasingly isolated. Neighbors who had witnessed my devastation quietly distanced themselves from the couple. Invitations to social gatherings dwindled. Even Mark's closest friends sided with him, uncomfortable with Jake and Stephanie's blatant relationship so soon after our divorces were filed. One evening, 6 weeks after Discovery Day, I was planting flowers in my front garden when a neighbour I barely knew approached with a casserole dish. "I went through something similar last year," she said, simply handing me the food. "It gets better, and for what it's worth, none of us blame you. What they did was wrong, period." Her kindness and the community support it represented brought tears to my eyes. For the first time, I began to believe I might not just survive this betrayal, but eventually thrive despite it. 6 months passed, bringing changes I never could have anticipated on that terrible Tuesday evening. My divorce was finalized with terms heavily in my favor, thanks to the evidence of Jake's infidelity and financial deception. The court awarded me the house and a significant portion of our joint assets, including Jake's hidden accounts, once they were discovered through legal proceedings. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong and forward-looking. Others I woke up reaching for Jake's empty side of the bed before remembering everything. But gradually, the good days outnumbered the bad. Therapy helped me understand that forgiving wasn't about excusing Jake's behavior, but about releasing myself from the burden of anger. I joined a support group for people who had experienced betrayal in their marriages. Hearing others' stories, some with even more devastating circumstances than mine, provided perspective and community. One evening, a woman in the group said something that resonated deeply. The affair wasn't about you lacking something, it was about them lacking integrity. Those words became my mantra on difficult days. Through neighborhood gossip, which I tried to avoid but couldn't always escape, I learned that Stephanie had left Mark, completely moving in with Jake, barely a month after our confrontation. Their relationship burned hot and fast. Within 3 months, they were constantly fighting. By the 5th month, Stephanie had moved on to someone new, leaving Jake as shocked and betrayed as he had left me. Mark sold his house and moved to another state for a fresh start. Before leaving, he stopped by with a bottle of wine and a card. "Thank you," the card read simply. Your strength showed me what dignity looks like in the face of betrayal. We toasted to new beginnings, two people forever connected by parallel pain, but not defined by it. Professionally, I thrived in ways I hadn't expected. With my personal life in shambles, I poured energy into my career. I applied for and received a promotion to charge nurse a leadership position I had previously been too insecure to pursue. My increased salary meant financial independence I hadn't fully experienced before adding another layer of confidence to my rebuilding life. I discovered new aspects of myself in this unexpected freedom. I took a pottery class I'd always been interested in, but Jake had dismissed as messy and pointless. I joined a hiking group exploring trails every weekend instead of attending the country club brunches Jake had preferred. I travelled alone to Santa Fe, a destination on my bucket list that Jake had vetoed multiple times. In reclaiming these small desires, I realized how much of myself I had compromised in our marriage. Not because Jake demanded it explicitly, but because I had gradually molded myself to fit his preferences, losing pieces of my identity along the way. The basement reading nook became my favorite place in the house, a symbol of transformation. Where I had once discovered betrayal, I now found peace reading novels, writing in my journal, or simply sitting with a cup of tea. The space that had held my greatest pain now witnessed my healing. Eventually, I decided to sell the house. Despite my renovations and reclaiming of spaces, too many memories lingered in its walls. I found a smaller home in a different neighborhood closer to the hospital and filled with morning light. Moving felt like shedding the final skin of my married life. Around this time, I noticed a new doctor at the hospital, David, a kind, soft-spoken trauma surgeon who always remembered the names of the nursing staff and brought homemade cookies to night shifts. When he asked me to coffee after a particularly difficult case we worked together, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our coffee date wasn't romantic. We talked about the case, about medicine, about books we'd both read, but it represented something significant, my heart opening just enough to let someone new in, even just as a friend. I wasn't ready for romance, might not be for a long time, but I was ready for connection again. Through the painful process of rebuilding after betrayal, I learned profound truths about myself and relationships. I learned that trust once broken can never be fully restored to its original innocence, but new trust can be built with stronger foundations. I learned that forgiveness isn't about the other person, it's about freeing yourself from the prison of bitterness. Most importantly, I learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. In the quiet evenings of my new home, with only myself for company, I found a peace I hadn't known was possible. The woman who had once defined herself as Jake's wife discovered she was complete on her own, stronger, wiser, and more authentic than before. Looking back at that evening in the storage room, I now recognize it as the moment that both broke and remade me. The discovery that shattered my heart ultimately freed me to build a more genuine life. The betrayal that felt like an ending became unexpectedly a beginning. I don't wish pain on anyone, not even Jake and Stephanie, but I am grateful for the woman I've become through this fire. Someone who knows her worth is not determined by another's choices, who understands that real strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. If you're watching this and facing your own betrayal, know that the path through is difficult but possible. Trust your instincts, surround yourself with supportive people, and remember that someone else's decision to break faith says nothing about your worthiness of love and loyalty. The greatest revenge isn't winning back a cheater or making them suffer. It's building a life so authentic and fulfilling that you realize their betrayal painful as it was ultimately set you free. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin after the most painful endings.